I had a debate with CardinalVirtues, see the description box, in which I explained why Christians interpreting Christianity, what I now call making shit up, can't be tolerated. By his responses, I believe he gets that. I went to his channel to download the video for mine, and I read a few of the comments left there. First, people wondered how Theo could be a racist literally, and not be a racist at the same time. Theo the person may not have a racist bone in his body. In fact, I assume he doesn't. But I'm not talking about Theo the person. I'm talking about Theo the Christian. I'm talking about all Christians. The person's name doesn't matter, neither does the person. The Christian, any Christian, is literally a racist because they worship racism, their God. To worship this creature, you must accept one race, the Jews, are to be kowtowed to, and that you can be exterminated in favor of them by them and their God, that you can be enslaved by them by the order of their God. If you accept this, you are a racist. The Christian worships torture. The Christian worships child murder, because their God believes these things are perfectly legitimate, and so they must believe it. A Christian is not a literal child murderer unless they committed the act, but the Christian is a literal believer in child murder. A literal child murderer and a Christian will both tell you they would murder a baby. They may have different reasons, but they are both baby murderers. Grammatically speaking, they are both baby murderers is not being used in the past tense. It is simply referring to the states of their minds. To be a Christian, you must believe what your God says is just, right, and true. The Christian Theo is not the Theo. That Theo and Christianity are not dependent upon each other. See, if a particular person that happened to be Christian passed away, Christianity would go on just fine. If everyone stopped believing Christianity today, that particular person would go on just fine. There is the particular person and the particular person, the Christian. Secondly, people wondered how I can say something is my interpretation of Christianity while saying I have no interpretation of Christianity. Easily. I have no thoughts on Christianity other than it is superstition and a terrible philosophy by which to run one's life. But I've debated many Christians. I would make a statement and they would all pull something from their rear ends to oppose it. Make shit up, what they like to call interpretation. I would ask them where they got that, and they would say the Bible. I would ask them to tell me the chapter and verse, and they would say it's not in there verbatim, but it's inferred. Yeah, by some other shit they made up. How do you combat people pulling shit out of their asses? You must come up with an interpretation of the Bible yourself and see if they dispute it. But it must actually be contained within their religious text, which are Christianity. Otherwise, you are just making shit up like them. That wouldn't work, and trust me, there's no need to make up anything about the Bible. So I have no interpretation of the Bible. I have a tool I created to use against them in their attempt to make shit up. Interpret their religion. So in that way, it is my interpretation because I made that tool. The unsettling part for Christians is that my interpretation happens to be true because it comes from their religious writings. Many got on my case about this interpretation, but that didn't faze me. Why? Because unanimously, the only problem with the interpretation was that they didn't like it. Maybe people have Christian friends or something and they don't want to be forced to look at them in the light I shone. CV didn't like me applying this interpretation to Theo and said if I had applied it to any other theist, it would have been the same. Because like the rest that disagreed, he didn't like the interpretation. Whether it is true never entered the equation for any of them. All we talked about was, is interpretation allowed? I waited for someone to pick that other end of the discussion up. I even laid it out bluntly for CV, telling him people disagree with it simply because they don't like it. What a Christian is independent of the existence of a God or the supernatural, the magic stuff. If Christianity went the way of ancient Egyptian and Greek myth, future anthropologists are left with their texts. To figure out what a Christian was, they must consult those texts, and those texts alone. Would they end up with a bunch of different interpretations of the Christian? A bunch of different denominations on the shelves of the Anthropological Museum. If the source that tells you what Christianity is, what a Christian is, can't tell you, then there is no Christianity. It is simply a hate-filled philosophy book written by humans, with no God involved. Theists, get used to it. You see, Theo is evidently a great guy. But what is Theo the Christian? What are Christians? Bereft of the ability to make shit up or interpret, more precisely. The Christian is left with only two things, the actual words in their book and a need to explain why they subscribe to those words. In other words, prove their God exists. They cannot prove their God exists because there is no evidence for its existence. So the magic, supernatural, is stripped from their holy book. All they have left are the words. All they have left is to abandon or defend those words. They choose to defend those words. They choose to defend those words. All I can see a Christian as is a person that believes genocide is okay. Torture is okay. Rape is okay. Child murder is okay. Human sacrifice is okay. Slavery is okay. All I can see when I look at a Christian is someone that defends and will carry out the most heinous acts with glee. I see inquisition, witch burning, book burning, the stripping of personal freedom through forced conversion, hate, destruction, death. All I see when I look at a Christian is lost humanity. I see the millions murdered, tortured, wasted in the name of this Lord by Christians. All that human potential squandered. All I wonder is where man would be today but for the interference of the Christian and all other theists in science and all other spheres of human endeavor. All I see when I look at a Christian are the dark ages. Yeah, people didn't like me spelling out Christianity for them with Theo Warner as my object. Well, it couldn't be helped. The only things I have faith in are those with evidence. That takes experiment. To prove what I wanted, it had to be demonstrated on someone. Was I too harsh on Theo Warner the person? No, I was never talking about him. But CV made me see there is an emotional impact to my words that I didn't see for the goal. So I apologized to Theo Warner for that. Some people thought I was apologizing to CardinalVirtues. No, I wasn't. It was Theo Warner for the reason I just mentioned. Was I too harsh on Theo Warner the Christian? No, I've seen many theists whine about how atheists curse too much. It offends them, evidently. Such protestations fall on deaf ears with me. They can't take the word fuck, but they can take a story about a guy sending his daughters out to be gang raped to save 2 angels from being gang raped. And he was the good guy, the guy Christians are to emulate. So when I look at a person that calls themselves a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew that worships this God, my utter disdain for them is hard to conceal, because I know the true countenance of that veneer of Christian purity and righteousness. So because of those videos, I've been told by some my rhetoric is too strong and got the impression that is what CV is telling me too. We humans are emotional creatures. Those nerves get hit and the point is lost. So I'm now in the midst of reworking those videos people had a problem with to make them less provocative. And over the next several days or more, we'll be re-uploading them as I simultaneously remove the originals. I'll try to get all the videos done as quickly as possible. The bottom line with me is that people giving Christians, theists, carte blanche to make shit up is the reason this shit is still around. Why this God's stranglehold has held for over 2,000 years. And humanity can look forward to another 2,000 more years of stunted growth if interpretation is continued to be tolerated. I guess every person must simply ask themselves, what do you want to do today for tomorrow's generations? And lastly, this has nothing to do with the stuff I just talked about, but it came up, so the subject of democracy. CV said that the U.S. Constitution says that I am less than a white person, and I said I accept that. CV was using the Constitution in an analogy. My saying that I accept that was an answer to that analogy. I am accepting that the definition of a democracy is that I am less than a white person, not that I accept I am less than a white person. CV was positing that the U.S. Constitution is the definition of democracy. I could accept it is or not. Since its acceptance as that was a condition of his point, for the sake of argument I accept it, otherwise I couldn't hear his point. That would make the U.S. Constitution objective. Everyone in the world would have to read it and agree that the U.S. Constitution is the definition of democracy. For the sake of argument, that is what I was agreeing to. One of the things that creates the definition of a democracy is that I am less than a white person. But that doesn't mean I have to accept democracy. That doesn't mean I have to be a Democrat. But I do believe in democracy. I am a democratic person. How? Because the Constitution can be amended. That is democracy.